Hey Jackals, I'm Simon and today is a bit special. Why? Because I'll show you how to make automatic mouth sync animation in DaVinci Resolve, completely for free. What's the catch? Well, you have to know how to install Python, how to use the command line tool, and that's about it. And what does the end result look like? I'll show you. Now let's get digital. So the final step will look something like this. We'll right click in the media pool, go to the timelines, import an XML file, which will be an FCPXML. In this case, this is the final step. Open it up, wait a little bit. You can name the timeline if you want, or simply click OK. And wait for the magic to happen. And we have the automatic mouth shapes complete. As you can see, this was a 4-minute file, and it made some automatic mouth shapes. I'll simply put them up. And what I'll also do, just so we can see this clearly, is I'll add a background as a solid and change this to... So as you can see, you will get automatic mouth shapes with no spaces in between them. Let me just zoom all the way in. There is one space because this is the old project that I was using, but otherwise you won't have any spaces, as you can see. And then if you play this, well, obviously you want images that don't have any background, but if you do, you would maybe change this to white and you wouldn't see any difference. You can then also, let me just go to this one, zoom this down and position it how you want, maybe something like that. Control C to copy attribute, select all of the other images, Alt V, select position and zoom, which is the scale. So all of the other mouth shapes should now also be positioned, but as you can see I have a lot of images, so this may take a while. Well, as you can see, the result is not the best, and that is because all of the images are of different sizes. So if you want to do this, make sure that you actually have the images of the same size. If you like what you see, you can follow along as I explain what you need and to get better results. But if you don't need any explanation, you can go to the description down below, go to the link section and download what you need. Then simply skip to the end, where I explain how you actually use the files that I've made. So the first thing that you need to do is to install Python. Now you can go to the Python website, download the version that you want. I was using Python 3.9, but I didn't install it in this way. I installed it in another way, and I'll leave a link to a card up above, so you can watch that video. Then once you have Python installed, you'll need to install something else, and that something else is called Allosaurus. Sounds like a dinosaur. So what is Allosaurus? Well, let's just take a look at the description. Pre-trained universal phone recognizer. And phone in this case means phonemes. Depending on how you installed Python, you can use this anywhere on the system, but if you can't, you'll have to go to the Python folder where the python.exe is. Then simply hold Shift and right click to get this option and simply open it. Then simply copy this command and paste it and press enter. And this should install Allosaurus for you. Now if this doesn't install and you have an issue of F2Py wasn't able to install, then I'll play the next video on how you can fix that issue. So in the start menu, what you have to do is type in sysdm.cpl to open the window. Then go to the advanced, go to variables, find the path, and add this path to the list. You can also search for it in the folder, just check if it is the same as what I have. And as a touch-up, you can also set pi if it's not set already in the actual path. Once you have Allosaurus installed, you'll need a WAV file. To do that, in DaVinci Resolve, once you have the WAV file in, let me just quickly add one in. So maybe this one. And yes, this does work with a 20-minute file, as you can see. So maybe I'll just shorten it. So once you have the file in, go to the delivery page. Then you'll uncheck the export under video. In the audio, you'll export the audio, select WAV, and the output track, set this only to the file that you want to export. So in this case, I'll select timeline track and select the track number. In this case, it's audio 1. Then add it to the render queue and export the audio as a wave. But for the purpose of this video, I'll use this audio file, which is 4 minutes long, and simply change this to audio.wave. Now, if you can't use the Python from anywhere on the PC, go to the Python folder and also copy the audio that you want to use inside that folder. But because I can use it from anywhere, I'll simply open a new window here. Now, the piece of code that we want to use here is this one. So we'll be using Python, we'll use Allosaurus, and in the Allosaurus, we'll be using the timestamp parameter because we do need the timestamps, and we'll output this to, let's say, output.txt, and the input file is, in my case, audio.wave. Then press enter. Now, depending on how long the audio file is, this may take some time. So the command finished successfully, but if it didn't, you can use this command, an ffmpg, which should be installed with Python. You can then simply use the input wave file. In this case, I would use audio wave. I would copy that file into an output file like output.wave, and that should fix the wave audio problem if you have it. What's good about ffmpg is that you can get the audio from a video file. Let's say you have an MP4 file and you want to get just a section of the audio file and export it as a wave file. You can also do that, but ffmpg has a lot of commands, so look them up if you want to use those. So now let's look at the actual file that we got. So what this file contains is the timestamps, because we enable them with this option. We have the duration, which is always the same, and that's not correct, and a list of phonemes. Now that's all and good, but if you take a look at this 4-minute file, we can see that you have 2000 lines, and that's not good, because each line is basically an image in DaVinci Resolve, and that's not what you want. So to have less phonemes in the list, what you can do is use some of the options. In this case, you can use the lang option for the language. You can access the list of languages like this and use them like this. But of course, you have to add it inside this first command. So you would add it like that. Then what you can also do, you can use the prior file. So how that looks like is you actually make a prior.txt file. I'll copy it here. And it looks something like this. Now this is one of the options that you can use inside the prior file. What this does is that it actually reduces or increases the number of phonemes. And you can also change how frequent a phoneme appears with this option. And then lastly, you can emit more or less phones. So if you use a positive value of more than 1, you'll get more phonemes. And if you use less than 1, you'll get less of them. Now these are just some basic options that you can use to get the result immediately, but you can also use the fine-tuning method to get the result that you want specifically. But I won't go into that. That's up to you. Now this is all fine, but what are the issues? Well, if you go to the issues, the first major one is the phoneme duration, which is always the same, and that's not good. And this actually cannot be fixed, as you can see from the comment of the author. So what this means is that if you have audio that has something like hello, so basically the audio that stretches, you won't get the result that you want. So you'll have to fix that in DaVinci Resolve by stretching the images. Now we have the phoneme list, and what do we actually do with it? Well, since this is a text file with timestamps, I decided to make an SRT subtitle file, so that you can actually import it in DaVinci Resolve as a subtitle. Since we already installed Python, I decided to program this in Python. But since I've never used Python before and I haven't programmed in a long time, let's say that the code is a little bit, how should I put it, unique. But it does what I want it to do, and I'll show you how it works so that you can make changes to it. So the piece of code in question is all2 sub, which is Allosaurus to SRT subtitles. So I've commented on most of the code, what it does, how to use it, and where you can make changes to it. If I didn't, well, it's good that you watched this video. Now the first piece of code that you will see is the letter list, which I should name the phoneme list. So each line represents a mouth shape, and each mouth shape has a bunch of different phonemes that it can have. And how I got to that is I used this cheat sheet, which doesn't have all of the phonemes. So let's say AE and EE, and let me find this one. So it's this one. As you can see, I've added a bunch of others, and I have no idea if I put them correctly, so make the changes to the list how you want. What's important about this list is that the first element in row represents the image name. So in this case, this would represent this mouth shape, or this one. And the second one, K, let's see, K would represent this mouth shape, and so on. I didn't test this, but you could also maybe write a word inside. So let's say this would be opened, and you would then have to name the image name open.png, TIFF, JPEG, and so on. But I didn't test this. However, I think it should work if that is what you want. The next thing that you can change is the output file name. As you can see, we make a subtitle SRT file. I prefixed the input file as all2sub dash, and this will actually be the name of the text file. So in this case, it will be output, because I'll be using the output text file as an example. But you can change this to anything that you want. You can also just shorten it. If you want, you can delete this and just have a plain SRT file with any name that you want. Then the most important thing that you can change is down here under the else. You can change this number. In my example, I've used the timeline of 24 frames per second. And let's see, 5 frames. So if there was a gap of more than 5 frames, it would put out a B. And B in this case is this mouse shape. So in this case, I've put a B, as you can see here, and you can also change this to maybe a capital Q. I haven't seen that letter appear in the phoneme list. You could also change this to blank, for instance. And in this case, this would be a unique mouth shape when the mouth is closed. So what you would do then is simply add a comma here, type in another set of these brackets, and type in blank. And also this has to be a comma, not semicolon. And now you would have 12 mouth shapes, and one would be for the blank mouth shape that appears when the mouth is closed for, in this case, more than 5 frames. But I'll just remove this. And now to use this piece of code, simply go to the top. You can copy this, or simply type it out, paste it inside, and in this case we have output.txt. If you have no issues, you will see these 2 lines that everything is done. Now let's go to the SRT subtitle file. As you can see, it's quite big. Open it in Notepad, and it will look something like this. So this is a legitimate subtitle file that you can also use in DaVinci Resolve. So let's open it. So you can right click in the media pool, import subtitle. As you can see, this is the name, all2sub-output. Open it, and I'll simply put it onto the timeline. I'll just go to the beginning and put it on. Now you don't see the subtitles because the color of the text is white, so I'll simply disable the background, and now we can see it. Now as you can see, this was the issue because I've done it before and I didn't update the actual files that I'll be showing. And this is the result that you can expect. So everything is lined up. So in this case, I've written blank, but the image is B. And in this case, if I wanted to use a blank image, I'd also have to have a blank image, which in this case I don't. So what I also have to change is to put this back to B. So let me put this back to B, and I'll make this text file again, just so I don't have any issues. So now this text file should have B's instead of blank. But once you import the file, this file stays. As you can see, it didn't update. So as you can see, we can't actually do a lot with the subtitle file, except for maybe checking if the images will line up correctly. So what we need to do is to convert the SRT subtitle file to an FCPXML timeline file that we can use in DaVinci Resolve. To do that, I've used this website, SubSimple. As you can see, you can change the SRT to FCPXML version 1.5, and that's all good. So simply choose the file. So in my case, this will be the output SRT subtitle file. Send it, wait a little bit, and it will download automatically. So now I've copied the file here, so I have everything in one place. And if we open it in Notepad, this will take a bit. It looks something like this. This is basically an XML file, which you can see at the top. So now that we converted the SRT subtitle file to an FCP XML file, what we could do, but I'm not saying that we should, or that we would, is to import this timeline file. So let's import it, and this will also probably take some time. So the file is loaded, but now if I zoom in, we'll quickly see an issue. Now do you see all of the gaps? This is not what we had in the subtitle. Now if I put the subtitle back in, we can quickly compare that something is really off. And not only is it off, some of them actually extend beyond what it actually has to extend. Now let's just say that everything's okay and we forget about the spaces. What can we actually do with the texts? Well, we could go to Edit and take a look at the options, and we could maybe use Fit to Fill. So Shift F11 and text B equals the image B. So Shift F11, well, look at that. We now replaced it. The second is R, let's find it. Shift F11. The next one is T, Shift F11, A, then K, and so on. You get the idea. But this takes a lot of time. And well, I have a lot of images to replace, or a text file to replace with images, and I don't have time to do that manually. Now unfortunately, DaVinci Resolve doesn't come with the option to find all of the texts that contain letter B so that we could replace it with image B. So what I did is I got creative and I made a second piece of code. But before I show you what that actually does, let me make a new timeline. I'll put two images on it, let's say A and B, and I'll also put one text file, and I'll name this file test. Now we can simply select this timeline, which is timeline number 3, right click, timeline, export XML. So I'll choose the same version as the one we got from Sublime, test timeline, save it, and now we'll open it. So now open it in Notepad, and it looks something like this. So the left file is the one I made just now, and the right one is the one that contains the phonemes. And the key difference is this file has assets. It has two of them because I've used two images. Both images have a file location, the duration, the ID, which is very important, and the name. And as you can see, this has a name of the phoneme and an extension. And this extension can be anything that you want. In this case, it's a capital PNG. This could also be a lower PNG, a mixed PNG, any kind of PNG, JPEG, TIFF, whatever have you should work, but I didn't test it by mixing and matching. And just an FYI, if you would for some reason change the image location before you actually import the final FCPXML file, you would need to do this step again, or simply replace this line with the actual location where the images will be located. Otherwise, the DaVinci Resolve timeline will not import the images, or actually the images will be media not found or media offline, something like that. Now if you take a look at the actual content of the FCPXML files, we can see that this one, where I've used the images, has video tags, and the title tag for the text. And this one has a title tag that is a little bit different, but the premise is the same. And that is, it has the offset, start, enabled, reference duration, and name. And I've used those pieces of information to make my own FCPXML file. But before we can actually use the piece of code that I've used, you need to do this step, and it's very important. So what you need to do is to make a timeline of mouth shapes, and I'll do that now with the images that I've made. And this one is a TIFF format, as you can see. So I've just deleted everything. I'll make this a new. So I'll put the TIFF images in, select all of them, put them on the timeline, and now I'll export this timeline. So go to timeline, export it, export as an FCPXML 1.5, and I'll call this mouse. And now if I open this FCPXML file, you'll see that I have all of the references for the images. So I now have all of the image assets here, and all of the images have different IDs, and that's what you want. So now let me show you what the actual piece of code that I wrote does. It's FCPXML, the text version, which is the phonemes, to images. What this piece of code does? Well, firstly, we make a list of extensions. So you can have PNG, 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 JPEG, JPEG, and so on. And it mixes and matches them to the actual letters. So this could be A.png, this could be B.png, D.png, and so on, depending on the image names. Then we have the output file, all to SRT to DaVinci Resolve.fcpxml. You can rename this file, but leave the extension alone so that you can actually import it in DaVinci Resolve. Now in the first while loop, we open the first file and read it all the way till the spine, and we copy everything into the output file. We also get the FPS because we need those for the calculations later on. And then from the assets, we also make a list to get the IDs and names that are split into letters and their extensions. Once this is done, we close the first file, and in the second part of the code, we open the second file, which is the phoneme file, and whenever we get to the title tag, we replace it with the video tags, and I make all of the magic happen inside. If you want to see how it's done, you can check out the code. You can't really change anything in here. This part of the code is used so the actual file, if you open it, looks formatted nicely. So like this. And that's basically what this piece of code does, is it takes the mouth FCPXML, gets all of the assets, closes it, takes the second FCPXML file, which is the phoneme list, and converts it to a video tag, so that we'll actually have all of the images automatically added. Now you can't really change anything inside this piece of code, but what you can do is use it. And if you watched up to this point, thank you. All that's left for me to do is to show you how to use it. Now if you didn't watch or pay attention to the explanation sections and simply want to use this, I'll show you. But if you have bad results and you don't know why, I kindly point you back to the explanation sections. So you installed Python, you installed Allosaurus, you also downloaded these two files, and it also includes the README file on how to use them. Simply hold Shift, right click, open the PowerShell window here. You'll want to input this first command, which uses the Python, the Allosaurus program. We make timestamps, we input the audio file, which is this WAV file, and we'll get this as a phoneme.txt. This may take a while depending on how long the audio file is. So this is done. If you open the file, you'll see the timestamps with the phoneme list. Now the next piece of line code that we'll want to input is this one, which will use this piece of code that I wrote and the phoneme.txt that you got out. The conversion is done immediately. It makes an SRT subtitle file. Then you have to put into SubSimple website. You choose the file, upload it, send it, and it will download. The file that you got will be an FCPXML file. So you have to convert the SRT subtitle file to an FCPXML file. And then the last piece of code that you want to use looks something like this. What you also need to do before you can actually use the next piece of code is to make a new timeline, put all of the images on it, just like this. Then right click on the timeline, go to timelines, export as an FCPXML. I've used 1.5 because that's also what SubSimple uses, so we don't have any issues. Then simply save it and give it a name. In my case, I've named it mouse. So now with that done, you have the mouse.fcpxml and you have the converted FCPXML file that you got from SubSimple website. Now it's not the phonemes, so in my case it's all to sub output. So I need to rename it output. And now this conversion is complete. And the last file that you'll get is all2 srt to DaVinci Resolve. So I had to do some last minute tweaks because when I use the TIFF timeline, this one, as you can see, the name is at the end. And everything was read incorrectly because I've split the line incorrectly. And the timeline that I was working on previously was with the PNGs. And the PNG in this case is in the middle. And that wasn't the issue, but the TIFF was because it was at the end. I've now fixed this, but if you find any other issues, let me know and I'll try to fix those. So if I now run this command with mouse TIFF, I renamed the FCPXML file just so I didn't confuse the PNG one. It's complete. If I go to it, you can see that we now have the TIFF images. And if I now go to DaVinci Resolve, so now I have an empty timeline just so you can see that this actually works without the images already loaded in. So right click in the media pool, import a timeline. This is the final one that the program makes if you don't change the name. It should load it in. Now in this case, this image was not loaded in, and that's because I've actually typed in O for the image name instead of the U as it should be. So I'll have to rename it here, right click on it, replace the selected clip, find it. So the shape in question is this now. I've already renamed it, but as you could see, it still wasn't relinked automatically. So now this is fixed, and what we can do now is move this up, add the solid background just so you can see the mouth shapes. You can also import the subtitles if you want to double check how good the animation was. And finally, we can also put in the audio, which is this one. I actually have no idea what it is, so let's take a listen. Hey Jackals, this video is a follow-up on the multiple subtitle video that I made a while back, and in this video I'll show you step by step how to display multiple subtitles and how to make changes to the text easily in DaVinci Resolve 17. Now let's get digital. I think the result is okay, but I'm not an animator, so let me know what you think. And if the results are bad, take a look at the Allosaurus, how to make the phonemes to adjust them, so you will get a different result. Also let me know if this was helpful to you, but don't just like or dislike the video. Please leave a comment. And you can also critique my Python spaghetti code. And that's it when it comes to making automatic lip sync animations in DaVinci Resolve. Now was the video the longest that I've ever made? Maybe. But it was definitely the most technical, which was fun to do, but demanding to make. Now lastly, if you want to get DaVinci Resolve, video editing content, and occasional content like this twice a week, subscribe to my channel. I'm Simon, and until next time Jackals, keep it digital.